career? Obviously, you played for Saracens at Bath, played for England a couple of times as well, which is decent little club run. How's that playing for England then?
It's all right. To be honest, like, I'm probably, if I'm honest, I'm probably a little bit bitter about my career, but in a funny way. Don't lose any sleep over it. But, you know, if you think like, if I'm down the local rugby club presenting some awards to the under-15s, there's a good chance I'm the best rugby player in that building, or was. But actually, where I go to work every weekend and all the lads I work with, I'm bottom of the food chain. You know, so I'm working with Austin and Lowell and Ben and those guys, and you've got us locked down with, you know, 8, 10, 15 caps. It does count, but it don't really count. That's what I was looking at. Technically, like, I would count as an ex-England international, but I don't know, pushing it, isn't it? I would never have got, I don't think I ever would have got 50 caps because of talent reasons, but I would have got more if I had been fit longer. I had so many injuries. I don't think I would have been a superstar player, but I think I would have amassed more caps, like especially with attrition rates in professional rugby. You just get more caps. You get more lads that get caps.
Yeah, it's a different game now, isn't it?
Yeah, there's the odd guy like EBEN who can just play 70, 80 minutes in almost every test, and he's just made of iron. But actually, I mean, that's genetics. It's professionalism and prep, but it's also genetics. Like, I played with lads who did the same work that I did, and, you know, prepped as hard as I did and were in good shape and retired at 21. I played with lads who did the same that I did and got injured twice in 15 years or 16 years. Like, people like to think it's all about professionalism and work ethic and ticking boxes, and it's not. It's a lot to do with that. It's just luck. If you've got, you know, if you look at my shoulders, for example, you know, there was a point when I would have been lifting what most people would call pretty heavy weights with my shoulders, you know, seated shoulder press and standing military press and all that. And I see lads like now in the gym and the little clips on Instagram and all that, and I think, geez, I was lifting some decent weight, but actually my cartilage was like candy floss. Like, so, you know, so I was good in the gym, but actually if my arm got pulled out a certain way, it just didn't go there. And if it got forced there, something tore. So that was that. And that's luck, mate. You know, I've got really strong shoulders that internally are made of chocolate. So it's kind of like, it's like if you've got a teapot that's made of stainless steel, but the handle's made of chocolate, you know. Yeah. It's always going to be compromised. And that's just luck. It's just genetics, you know.
Yeah. How did you find like the England camp? Because obviously Ellis Genge came out and spoke about it quite recently, saying like you found it a bit awkward and it took quite a while to fit in. Did you fit in straight away, or did you?
I always fit in reasonably well because I'm sociable and talk to people and like a laugh, and I can laugh at myself and that sort of stuff. But I don't look back. I look back and think the games I played for England I loved, and the tours I went on I loved. But I don't look back and remember enjoying the camps. No, I don't remember enjoying them. I think that's partly because my social confidence isn't synthetic. It isn't fake. It's real. I'm quite a relaxed bloke socially to a point, but it's like there was a lot of the pressure to perform. I found I wasn't that comfortable in that environment, and there were people that were great to me, like Jason Leonard was amazing, and, you know, just a great bloke and very, very helpful, and always let me step in and do reps and all that sort of stuff. And it wasn't that anyone was horrible or nasty to me. I mean, you know, as a young, it wasn't anything like that. It was just, I don't know. I was probably nervous about the step up because it was so early. I was 19 or 20 years old when I was first in the England squad in the front row, and there are some pretty gnarly old boys out there, and I didn't mind that side of it, but I think it was probably a bit too soon. And then by the time I really got into my stride and started playing well and handling good props and putting lots of games together, my shoulder went when I was 23, and that was the first one of 5 reconstructive surgeries. And you're like, well, I sort of got my act together a bit in about 2002, had a really good tour with England to Argentina, came back, felt brilliant, had a good rest, really cut down on the boozing. Like, I wasn't that bad, but we were probably on the piss twice a week, and that's a lot as a pro. So cut that down to 1, but cut that down a bit. And I wasn't like a mad drinker. I've never been a 20 pint sort of bloke, but I loved a night out and, you know, young single boys and all that. And cut back on that a bit, thought about professionalism a little bit, sort of for the first time in my 4th year as a pro, and actually really started. It made a massive difference straight away. Like less booze, more prep, things like stretching, things like going home and thinking about the food you're eating a bit more. It made a massive difference straight away. And my rugby literally went, I was 50% better in about 6 weeks. I reckon it was that quick. And I played 2 games after that tour for Saracens, felt amazing in the games. And it wasn't like man of the match or anything. I mean, I was in both games, but I wasn't going to go on about it. And then got injured. My shoulder went, and I was like, 6 months, 5.5 months out. It was World Cup year. So World Cup's gone. Not that I might have gone anyway, but it was gone. And don't forget, like, I had the best game of rugby I ever played to that point on the England tour with Clive Woodward in the season of the World Cup. So I would have had, I think I would have been at least training there and been invited to prove my point, but that was gone. So I think I got my act together properly in my early 20s, and my injury started at the same time. So that's just the way it goes. Get over it. But I don't walk around feeling like an England player, I'll tell you that.
Fair enough.
So how big of a difference was the step up? So stepping up to pro rugby and then stepping up to England level, how is it? Is the step bigger going to England or just going to pro?
I think different for everyone, and it's a while ago now, lads. But I mean, like, my last England tour was in 2010, so it isn't that long ago. But to Australia and New Zealand. But there is a difference. I think it depends what your makeup is really. Like when I was playing, it was like, right, do I have the strength to handle international props? And then I did, and that was fine. I had that and whatever. But now I look at the game now and think the step up is particularly huge because of the number of involvements a prop has to have in a game. You know, if you look at how active, even like, you know, I know this, you know, you mustn't date podcasts too aggressively, but you know, it's whatever the date is now. It's Monday, 28th of November, isn't it? So 2 days ago, England played South Africa at Twickenham and got well beaten. And you look at France Malherbe and you think, well, he's a one-trick pony. He's just a scrummager. He's not. I mean, he's not a big carrier. He's not the world's greatest defender, but he does hit. He does hit well. He does put in offensive hits in the defensive line. He gets to where he needs to be. He's good at clearing out rucks. He's good at counter-rucking. He's a handful. So even he has a lot of involvements in a game. But then you look at someone like Genji or Sinclair or whatever, when they're playing well, the number of involvements, or Mako, just enormous. And that's a universe away from the game we played. So as for step up, the games I played for England, I loved. I felt out of my depth in one scrum against South Africa when I was 20 years old and thought, shit, these guys are frigging strong. That's the only time. Otherwise, you know, not like I played tons of games, but I played against Argentina and they had the world's best front row and a couple of the best props in the world. And I was 22 and I was only on that tour because the good players were rested, and or most of them. And we did a job on them, and you know, so I didn't find the step up cripplingly difficult. I think I found staying fit and being fit. Like I'm not naturally a fit guy. Like I'm not an athletic guy. Like you watch Genge run around, he's an athlete as well. Sinclair's an athlete. They're in great shape. I was not like that. I'm not athletic. You know, I'm strong first, athletic third, skillful eighth. I'm not sure what second. Probably hungry. So I found the running really, really minging, really bad. And there were pre-seasons where my body felt good, and I'd do the whole pre-season, and my fitness scores would be. I remember once there's a test we did, and you got to count the number of seconds you do it in. I forget, and mine was like 2:59 on the first day of pre-season. They used to test you on morning one, flat out. No, you know, no like week to get into it. You had 4 weeks off or something, or whatever, it's 4 or 5 weeks off. And 259 seconds. And I remember getting like the coaches coming to me at the end of pre-season and say, you've just been outstanding. We're chuffed to bits. And the nutritionist is like, shit, your body fat's flown down. I'm like benching loads. I'm deadlifting loads. I'm pressing loads. My all that sort of stuff. All the involvements in fitness games are flying up.
Yeah.
I went to 2 literally not 5 seconds off my total in 8 weeks. And they're like, it's basically the same score. I was like, well, you know, and it's like, not like I haven't been trying. That drop of booze, ate well, kept it tight. And it's like my running fitness was just crap. Like there's not a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't, I was never very good at that.
Well, we've spoken about England in the past. What do you reckon what do you make of England now? Have you been watching the Nation Series at the minute?
Yeah, I commentated on those games and so I had front row seats, so it's been great. But I don't think England are in a good place at the time of recording. I don't think they're in a good place. It's really easy to say someone needs to be sacked. It's really easy to say that, and I hate saying it. I really don't like saying it. I'm almost allergic to saying it because someone saying that about me would upset me, so that's kind of how I view it. But it is my job to be objective, and I now am at the point where it feels a bit like listening to a Boris Johnson interview, in that I now can't believe people buy what he's saying, what Eddie Jones is saying, and this isn't necessarily. It sounds like a vindictive comment. I think he's in a real corner after that South Africa game. He's in a real corner because things have gone so badly, and he wants to protect his job. He's not going to walk out for a number of reasons, I don't think, because firstly, he's ambitious and he wants to do the job and he wants to fix it. So if I have a bad game of rugby, a couple of bad games, I'm not going to say, coach, don't pick me. I'm going to say, leave me there, I'll fix it. He's competitive. That's why he's had so much success and such a long and lucrative career. Equally, if he walks away, he doesn't get any money, right? So that's also his job, which is it's completely reasonable not to resign when, if you make them sack you, as it were. So it's either I'm staying or you sack me, you get an enormous amount of money. Like, that is completely reasonable. It is his job. We would all do the same thing. I think we all would. But I now am at the point where Eddie Jones is saying things, I just don't believe them. And I know he's very bright and charismatic. And I think there are, whether people concede it or not, there are elements of his MO that we will miss if he goes, or when he goes. He'll go after the World Cup anyway, regardless. But there's a lot to talk about with Eddie Jones. And if you're in the media, there's a lot to talk about. And let's say Steve Borthwick may or may not get the job. And Steve Borthwick is a great old mate of mine. And that it's an interesting one. If he gets that job, I will probably have to make a phone call to him and say, listen, I love you, mate. We played together since we were 16, 17 years old. Yeah. I've known him more than half my life. I love you, mate. But I am going to be objective when things don't go right. And that might end up at some point me saying, listen, I think you're probably not the best guy for the job anymore. And that, I hope it doesn't cost us a friendship, but that's the only time in my career internationally I think that will feel awkward. But you won't get the Eddie Jones stuff from Steve Borthwick, because I think apart from anything else, he's very private. He doesn't feel the need to share stuff he doesn't need to share with people he doesn't know, which I respect entirely. And he's not doesn't need the attention. I genuinely think Eddie Jones enjoys the attention, and there's a bit of this with Eddie Jones, and to a much greater extent at the moment with Rassie Erasmus, with the things he's been doing on social media. Yeah. One of the South African defences is that he's taking the pressure off the team, and I don't buy it. I think he loves the attention on himself. I think it's a version of egomania, and I don't necessarily buy that. I think taking the pressure off your team is one thing, but do you really take the pressure off your team? Because they're the ones running out and playing. I don't. So I'm now at a point where I think England, the very least this review needs to do is say to Eddie Jones, if you finish below second in the Six Nations, or if you lose this many games in the Six Nations, you are out. But then you are another few months down the line. So I'm at a point now where I think drastic change is needed, because I haven't seen England this rudderless in a long time. And if it was a generation of players where you're like, I know they're England, but there's some average lads out there. Yeah. And those generations have happened. Like, I'll have played in teams like, it's like there are some lads out there who aren't world beaters, but you've got some amazing players. You've got amazing players who aren't doing it. So,
we've got a very good squad, haven't we?
Or do you look at the fact that coaching is about getting the best out of a group of players? That's all it's ever been about. And that isn't happening. So I think England either need something enormous and explosive to happen now in terms of change, or a new coach, So equally, it's one. If Eddie Jones stays and goes to the World Cup and gets to a final or wins it, I would very, very, very gladly indeed be wrong. Very happily be wrong. No problem with that at all. And eat my words on telly. Absolutely no problem. Would love that to happen. But at the moment, it feels as unlikely as it has done before a World Cup for a long time.
What do you reckon has gone wrong? Is it just all the media outside of the game, maybe putting the players off, or is it just, I don't know, in camp?
I'm part of the media, so I'm biased. If you blame the media for the way England play, you've lost the plot. If you blame the Sunday Times and the Guardian and the Daily Mail for England's attack being poor, you've lost the plot. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing to do with the media. Nothing. Zero. It is all to do with coaching and performance and game plans and communication. That is all it is to do with. It is the rugby side. What we do is talk and write about what we see. And we have to have strong opinions. And it's also one of those things, it's easier to say, oh, the media, British media. Okay, fine. Without the media, literally without us lot, there is no professional game for you to talk about. There is not one, because the money for the professional game comes from television, comes from TV rights. It comes from massive TV rights packages. Now, when, you know, if you play for a club, I'm down in Bath, I played at Bath. If you know, the owner paid my wages. Bruce Craig paid my wages. Yeah, but he is reimbursed to a massive extent by the money that comes from TV rights deals. So where does all his money come from? It's central funding, which is to do with. So it's all there is nothing for me to talk about without professional players and coaches. There are no professionals. They don't have jobs if there's no media to cover it, because no one knows they're there and no one's giving them money for TV rights. So the whole blaming the media thing, like one statement, an interview Eddie Jones did after the game that I read last night was, he said about this review, talking about Bill Sweeney, he said, he'll have his opinion based on what you guys write and I'll have mine. Almost as if I read that, like maybe I'm wrong, but I read that as like a flat out dig at the CEO of the RFU, saying, well, he'll just believe whatever you guys write. And do you know what? I was like, firstly, unless I've completely misread it, and it's just a quote online, so maybe I've misread it. Hands up if I have. But that is a major dig. That is saying that you don't back your CEO to have his own views, right? And he just believes what. Also, it's saying that whatever. I mean, I'm not writing at the moment for anyone, so it's like, it's also saying that at least none of the newspapers during the tournaments, it's saying the writers don't know what they're talking about either. And that's not true. There'll be the odd bit we get wrong, of course there will. But are you telling me that the writers saying that England are playing poorly are wrong? Of course they're not wrong. They're not wrong. They're bang right.
They're having a terrible year.
Terrible year, like really terrible. And they've got really, really good players. Really good.
They've got very good score.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain areas like against South Africa where you just think, what can you do about that scrum? England have got some really, really good props. South Africa have better props in the scrum at the moment. This generation of South African props is better than this generation of English props in the scrum. And what do you do about that? What do you do? Do you change the coaching? Do you coach them in a different way? I honestly, it's like people say, England have got to find a scrum. Yeah, where? There are not 135 kilo world-class tight heads growing on fucking trees, mate. Where do you want to find them? Will Stewart is the biggest, strongest tight head in England. Like, that's what I think. Dan Cole would be probably the highest performing on average week after week, but he hasn't been near a squad since 2019. Genge's scrummaging has just got better and better and better. Will Collier, for me, the Quins tight head, would be actually talking about people in the England squad. Will Collier would be the best scrummaging tight head in England. Will Collier is the sort of player who plays for Quins. He's injured at the moment. If he was South African, he'd have 30 or 40 caps. Because it's like, we'll work on the other bits, but that scrum is what we need for our best players to shine. You're in. Yeah. But because he's a really good rugby player, but when you compare, someone like Sinclair, Stewart actually carries a lot. Genge, Mako, those guys, they're so active around the field.
Yeah.
That they think, well, they offer so much more over the course of 80 minutes or 50 minutes. It's like, yeah, I know, but You know, imagine if South Africa tried to properly put it on you in a scrum and didn't get anywhere. Like, that would change the game. And
Yeah.
so there are other options, but geez, there ain't many.
Yeah, exactly. Well, after your career, what made you go into punditry and commentary and all that stuff?
Oh, panic, mate, panic. No, it wasn't. I tried it when I was still playing, and my agent was like, "Do you want to try being a pundit on Sky Sports?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm all right."
Yeah.
You know, TV's for show-offs, and anyway, it was on a Sunday, and I said, "I'm on the piss Saturday night. All the London Irish boys are staying down, so I'm all right, thanks." And big guy Bob Casey stayed at my flat, I think. I think it was anyway, and it was. She's like, "Well, I booked it, so the car picks you up at 10. You need to wear a suit. You're doing it." So I was like, "Right," did it, quite enjoyed it. Did it again, quite enjoyed it. Did it probably 20 times, and then it's funny. I got some feedback from one of the senior producers via my agent and said, "Oh, he's lazy, doesn't do any prep, and he just turns up and thinks that's enough." And I was just like, "Right, I've got no idea what prep to do." Like, now, everyone's way more aware of these things, because you've got, like, you know, you've got commentators every game posting their notes online and saying, "Here's the prep, ready to go," and that sort of stuff. People know you have to do prep.
Yeah.
A few of us that were doing it genuinely had no idea what prep we would do. We didn't have access to loads of games. There wasn't, you didn't put your iPad on and go on the Opta website with our little professional rugby login and watch all the games and break it down to scrums. And we had none of that. None.
Yeah.
If I turned up to do London Irish against Quins, I had not seen them play since the last time we played them. Like, that's how it worked. So you got, who plays for them again? That's what it's like. So you're like, how do I prep? So I've spoke to a couple of more senior guys, and they said, "I do this, this, and this. I read this. I read everything." And I'm like, right. From then on, bang, I was into it, and I was prepping properly. And now I obviously prep properly and all that. So I just enjoy it, and maybe it lasts forever. Maybe it doesn't. I enjoy it. I still think when I do it, I've got a responsibility to firstly enjoy it. So if I really stop enjoying it, I think I will bin it, even though it's my job.
Yeah.
I think I would bin it, but I really love it. Like, I wake up looking forward to the games, and when I commentate, I enjoy myself. I also think there's a real responsibility to give proper opinions on things. And after the game in South Africa, I did give proper opinions on things, but overnight, I sort of thought to myself, not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure. I think I might have changed my mind. And on the highlight show the next day, I actually said something completely different. You know, so you're allowed to change. That's allowed on reflection. Like, so what happens is you finish the commentating, you literally mic down and you run and you try and get through the thousands of people. You run, can't take the lift because you haven't got any time. I'm literally running, trying to push through. Sorry. And people don't let you through. They don't realise that you're a commentator and you've got to get to live TV on the touchline. "Oh, please. I'm down the same staircases as everyone else. Oh, sorry, mate. Get your pass out. Need a wee. Desperate for a wee. Have a wee." Run in, and they're starting. They're like, now. So I've got earplugs. Can't get them in properly. The wires are everywhere. Go, Flats. Do you think Eddie Jones? Do you still have faith in him? I'm like, what? And you can't hear anything or anyone else is saying. And you're like, yeah, sure. And then it's like, right, we're off air now. Okay, cheers. Right. What was that? You know, so it can be a bit like that. No one's fault. That's just how it is. You need to zip wire down from comms. But and I got in my car and thought, don't know about that. So that happens. But I got into it because my agent pushed me into it. But yeah, I love it now.
Yeah, what we love is your dynamic with Top Zero now. And I think that's brilliant.
It's good.
Yeah. And obviously your grassroots buttes. I think that's class what you do together.
Mate, it's an awesome one this week. And if you've seen it yet, this one this week's the best one we've had. I think what I'd say about Topsy is that I don't like him. No, what I'd say about Topsy is that he doesn't whiten his teeth, but he's got the whitest teeth I've ever seen. And he doesn't whiten them. That really annoys me. He's just a beautiful man with perfect skin, which is annoying. And he's still in really good shape too, but that'll go. That'll go. He'll have a little pot belly in a couple of years. What I'd say is we do this thing called Topsy's Tape, and he has a little bit of analysis. And I never watch that before we go record it, because I find it quite interesting to react off the cuff, But every single time, it's stuff I haven't seen. Every single time, and it's really interesting. And every bit of analysis he has, like, I was like a bit frazzled this weekend, and I'm like, right, I've seen Sale against Bristol. I've watched it. You know, I got to my hotel in Leicester about 11:15, and I was like, right, I've got 2 games to watch, so I'm going to watch one that I haven't seen. I'm going to watch one tonight, and I'm going to wake up and watch one in the morning. So I watched Sale Bristol before I left the hotel to go to Welford Road. Watched it, so it's fresh. Got there, I felt like I'd never seen it before. Because you're knackered, you're just frazzled, and I was just like, I can't remember anything from that game. Can you remind me? And he's like, bang, 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 bang. I'm like, yeah, thank you. It's all coming back. And then he's like, what we did in the first half was this, second half was this. I'm like, I've read every report from the game in all the papers. No one's mentioned that. I didn't see that. And he brings something original. So I think he's very good analyst, yeah.
Yeah, no, he's very good together. And he comes across.
I wish I could have forgotten the Sale Bristol game.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah, or the last few for you.
Yeah,
6 now, is it? Six, they've lost 6 in a row now.
Something like that.
Place.
They're struggling, mate. They're struggling. And last season, Bristol really struggled last season, and no one really talked about it because Bath was so bad. So it wasn't the old Bristol divide, but the Premiership story was Bath are losing every game. That was the Prem story of the week, every week. That end of the table. So Bristol just got away with being 10th. They just got away with it, and it was like you'd watch them play, and you're like, geez, I don't think they've ever quite got recovered from losing that semi-final to Quins. They've never looked the same.
No, I don't think so.
But they'll do well to get their internationals back. That won't hurt.
No, well, even with our full squad, we still managed to struggle somehow.
Yeah, Genji makes a difference, mate. Genji's the.
Yeah, he's class.
It was like the South Africa 15 game. We hardly had our full squad out, but that was the best rugby I've seen us play since the 2 seasons ago when we finished top.
But which is a shame because it's a game that is fun but doesn't really count. But then you're also against a team that isn't that organised as well. So what you've got to do is be good against teams that know what's coming. That's the difficult bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like a Barbarians game, isn't it? It's not really.
Yeah,
we need Semi back, and you know Lango back, we need all the Flyers back. But
mind you, when Semi was fit, like it's not that he wasn't doing anything; it's just he wasn't. You know, I always think an outside centre is a really good gauge of where a backline is at, where an attack's at. Because if you watch Quins like Joe Marchant or Luke Northmore, whoever plays at 13, you almost always find yourself talking about what they're doing and mentioning them a lot in the game. Whereas when Bath weren't a high functioning, they look a bit better now, Bath. But the last season, for example, you just hardly mentioned. I actually thought Jonathan Joseph was the best player in the Bath squad last year. I thought that was one of his best seasons for Bath, and it was a really important season because they were struggling so much. But you hardly talked about him in attack for the last couple of years, and it's either because your 13 is not good enough, but we all know he is. We all know Randrandra is. But actually, they do need some space creating for them. They do need the right ball. They do need defenders to be put on their heels in midfield in order to give them some space. They do need something to work with. And I think that Randrandra has looked. Randrandra hasn't looked particularly well used. That's the point. Yeah, it's just I think it's a good gauge. Like I remember Paul Grayson, who is another just a brilliant analyst, potentially the best, I think. He said you can tell a lot about your fly half by whether or not your 13 scored a hatful of tries. And if you've got a decent 13 who can move and score, and you're not hearing about him, it's because you've got the wrong 10, potentially the wrong 12, but you got the wrong 10. So that's not always, but often. And I think that's an interesting one. When you think about how much you mention, obviously Marcus Smith, but how much you mention Joe Marchant in an average Quins game or Luke Northmore. They're doing something right, and I think Bristol are not doing. Some of the stuff is really innovative, and some of the attack looks great, but it's not until the Sale game, where at least in the first half, I thought they looked greatly improved. Actually, a lot of what they're doing doesn't look quite right, and it's undermined by the set piece not being top of the range at the moment, and having if you got your starting England props away, that's going to make a difference to any squad. If you're basically, if you're not cheating the salary cap, you're going to miss these players a lot. Basically, there's no way to not miss them.
Did you watch the Women's World Cup?
Did I watch it? Bloody, I was there, mate. Every game in the studio, mate. I was there going through the night for the cause. I'll be honest with you, lads. When people mention the Women's World Cup, the first thing I think of is fatigue. I was so tired because we had Prem going on as well, and then Autumn Internationals going on at the same time as well, and it was like going through the night, and you couldn't go to bed, because you got to go to work the next day. So no, it's good fun. I think it was the right final, and the final was amazing. Like that'd be one of the best games of rugby you could watch this season. Really frustrating for England because not the way they lost it. Red cards happen, but the way they didn't convert their final line. It's not that they definitely would have scored if they'd taken the line out cleanly, but the way they fluffed that drill, that'll kill Lewis Deacon, their forwards coach. That'll haunt them because it wasn't a good drill. But then England men's at the weekend against South Africa, they got taken apart on the 5 metre lineouts. South Africa nicked a couple of theirs. So easier said than done, lads.
Yeah, I think. The annoying bit was that they were doing it the whole game, and they had scored a try off of a maul like that, but just annoying that it slipped out of their fingertips.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's about if you got the caller, the main jumper and caller puts herself to the front with a pod at the front. So absolutely, what New Zealand think is the first option for England is straight up at the front. So what you need is. It's easy to say now, but you need some movement behind. You either need another option in the middle, probably not at the back, it's too risky, but in the middle, probably another option. So a get out option if they got you marked, which they did. You also need some movement. So that back lifter on the New Zealand front pod or the jumper, there was nothing to distract them and make them think just for a millisecond, they might not be going here. There was no movement, no subterfuge, no choreography at all, no work off the ball. It meant that everyone was just lining up the flat front ball, and it's probably the easiest line out to defend in the world. So I think when it came to it, England, unfortunately for them, lost a little bit of perspective and basically, got knackered, complacent, just didn't quite think of it, whatever it is, and made it too easy to defend.
And from a hooker's point of view, you can't really do anything to help in that situation.
No, you're knackered.
All you can do is throw it straight and hope she gets it.
Yeah. But loads of the ball, the lineouts weren't thrown that high. They didn't need to be thrown that high. They weren't hitting double tops all game because New Zealand weren't competing. It was bizarre. Yeah. So they didn't compete for 40, 50 minutes. So England were just gifted lineout ball and gifted mauls. It was just. Weirdly, New Zealand won it and good on them, but it was really poor set-piece defence from them for an hour or so.
Yeah.
Really poor.
I think their strong points definitely in their backs. Like they had a lot of sevens players like Portia Woodman just tearing up, and it was really not easy to defend.
Props came off the bench, Crystal Murray. Jeez, she was good. I kept trying to get the commentators to call her Crystal Meth. I call her Crystal Meth in every production meeting. Crystal Meth, and then off air, Crystal Meth. Just trying to slip up one of the commentators. Try and slip Nick Mullins up to make him call her Crystal Meth. Didn't work.
That would have been funny. She is a hell of a unit though, and she put in a serious shift, made a massive difference.
Yeah, offloads, hands, explosive footwork. Amazing player. Yeah.
But that World Cup showed that the women's game isn't that far from the men's. Like it should be just as watched. It's still entertaining.
Yeah, I also think people get, understandably, but people get so bogged down with men's versus women's rugby, or football. It's like, who cares, mate? The ladies don't care. I know a lot of those. They're not comparing themselves to the men all the time. They probably are if it's like you turn up to a tournament and you don't get looked after properly. But hopefully those days are gone and going.
They seem.
In terms of the product, it's like just watch whatever sport you want to watch. Like if you don't like watching women's rugby, ask yourself why. Is it because you don't think women should be playing rugby? And I don't think there's always going to be those people around, and that's almost all men. Is it that? Then all right, it's probably not a particularly cool perspective, but do what you want. Don't watch it then. Or is it because you think the games are crap and the games aren't crap? Some of the games were crap. Like,
yeah,
it's a World Cup. So Portugal have just qualified for the Men's World Cup. If they play one of the big dogs, that will not be a good game. It will be an exhibition in try scoring, but it will not be a competitive World Cup match. But it will be a great occasion for Portugal. So we'll love it for that reason. But when England are winning 84-0 and someone's winning 70 here and 68 there and 80 there, they're not good games. You know, so but that's World Cups. That happens. So some of the games, you got professional teams against amateur teams and they smashed them to bits. So for someone to say that every single game was amazing in the Women's World Cup, it's not true. Some of them were rubbish because they were hammering. There was thrashings, and they're not the best games. So they're good. They're good, probably good for the new viewer actually, because there's loads of tries to scream at. Like I'm watching the Football World Cup at the moment here and there, and it's still, after all these years, one thing I struggle with. I really like football. I love football. I watch basically, I'm a match of the day football fan. Yeah. But one thing I still struggle with, and it's a really puerile thing to say, is that how infrequently anyone scores. And it's almost like you can go an hour without a goal or an hour and a half without a goal. And it's like you have to really appreciate the intricacies of football, like you guys do, to keep watching that. For me, I'm like, I won't bother. And I love sport, I love football, but I'm not watching an hour and a half with no goals. So if you think about England winning 84-0 or whatever it is, or 84, there is lots of cheering to do for a neutral fan, for new fans. There's a lot of things to celebrate. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, and like with the Football World Cup, we've already had 4 or 5 0-0 draws.
Yeah,
it's just not exciting anymore. But like with the England game the other night, I fell asleep during the first half, and then went out down to the football club for the second half and didn't watch any of it. And there was nothing to watch really, so I'm not bothered that I missed any of it.
Like I want it to be good, but like, I'm a rugby fan first. You know, I could sit and watch a boring game of rugby and I'm all right with it. One game I watched last season or 2 seasons ago. It was Newcastle. I love watching Newcastle normally, but it was Newcastle against, I think it was London Irish. And I was texting, who was it? Might have been Topsy or someone. And I was just like, this is unbelievably boring. It's so boring. I'm going to stop watching it. So anyway, we got to the highlights, and it was like I started doing the highlights links. And I said, I turned off at half time because it was so boring. And they're like, no, you can't say that. You can't say that. It's like, well, all right. Let's say this. Let's say that the highlights began at 36 minutes. When the highlights flip, the first highlight is at 36 minutes. I was like, you've created a highlight package that skips the first 36 minutes of the game. Don't tell me it wasn't boring. Yeah. They're like, you can't say it. So actually, I felt bad then, and I went away and actually watched the second half before we did our recording. So I thought, I can't make that the only half I haven't seen of the weekend. But I was like, I'm actually going to go and cook dinner now because this is too much. Like, this is a waste of my day. And I played in loads of games like that. And Newcastle are always good value to watch normally, but it was just one of those days where it was like, this just happens, you know. But football's like that too often for me to properly invest in 90 minutes of viewing 2 or 3 times a week.
At the end of each episode, we ask for an all-time 15, like a dream team. Okay. But like we've done in every episode, no one actually does a 15.
All right, I'll just go for it. All right,
go for it. And preferably favourites over best.
Yeah.
It's been a bit samey recently.
Yeah.
Okay, loose head. No one will have picked my loose head. You won't even know my loose head. My loose head is former All Black Carl Hoft. Remember him? No, well, Carl Hoft and Carl Heyman, 2 props, All Blacks. Favourite hooker, I'm going to try and be original, not say Fitzpatrick, so it's an all black front row. I'm stalling at the first hurdle, lads.
What's that French player with the blonde hair? Hooker.
Zarzewski, he's gorgeous.
Yeah.
He's gorgeous. Hookers, I'm going to go JOHNATHAN HUMFREYS, the former Welsh captain. Just like animal. Absolutely loved him. One of those blokes you're on the field and you think, if I've got to die here now with him, I'm all right with it. I mean, I wouldn't have been on reflection, but you feel like that at the time. Second row's Jono. And I'm going to go Jono and EBEN.
Good show.
Because normally you'd try and pin it, you'd try and pair him with a Retallick, a baller, but I think Jono and EBEN does everything for me at the moment. I think he's a brilliant player. So those 2. And back row, this is brutal. I'm going to go Henry Tuolangi at number 8.
Oh, lovely. It's a great
I'm
show.
going to go Richard Hill at blindside. And I'm going to go, it's either Olivier Magne or Richie McCaw at 7. I'm going to go Olivier Magne, French, at 7. Scrum half, easy. Jost van der Westhuizen, easy. The late, great Jost van der Westhuizen. 10.
Always a difficult one.
Saw Dan Carter last week at the All Blacks game. Annoyingly handsome. 10 is difficult. It's not easy, lads.
You can come back to 10 if you want.
10
Because
or 11,
it's the
Jonah.
hardest one.
Jonah, obviously.
Yeah.
And in the centres, I'll go Brian O'Driscoll and Tana Umanga. And I know they're kind of both 13s, but one of them can play 12. They can play left and right if they want. The other wing, Jason Robinson walks into my team. He is the first name in my team. So he's going to go on the wing, I think, if I can think of another fullback. But fullback, I'll go Matt Perry.
Nice.
England Lions, hardest man in the world.
Great team. Hell of a team.
Best
10.
on high ball in the world, hardest bloke, runs through brick walls. And then you've got the magic outside him. So there you go. Who did I pick at 10?
You haven't picked anyone yet.
Yeah, I picked 10.
Did I? Carter is the obvious one. I don't want to be that obvious, but I'm going to pick Dan Carter. I think he's the best.
It's hard to not pick him, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Like Johnny's an icon as well, but I think I'll go Dan Carter.
That's fair. That's a solid team.
We're not doing bench, are we? I can't handle the bench, lads.
No, it's not right.
Yeah.
And we also do the your favourite kit of all time as well.
Argentina 2002. Horizontal hoops.
Obviously thought about that before.
The best kit.
Can be an Argentina kit.
You know what you should do is you should ask rugby players their favourite book. That always stumps them because they don't read because they're mutants.
We'll do that in the next one then.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I mean, I haven't got one, so don't ask me. Usually it's their own autobiographies. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Cheers, boys. All done?
Cheers.
Yeah,
Good.
Thanks, lads. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Not a problem.
Cheers, boys.
Absolute pleasure.
Cheers, boys. Top man.
Cheers.
Good luck. Cheers.
Bye-bye.